Hi, it's Ashley from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials, as well as give a lot of baking business tips. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start off by making that piece of buttercream that sticks out above the cake. Now, in order to do this, you will need to make sure that you have really great refrigeration. This is honestly one of the worst cakes to make during a heat wave, but that's what I did. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my Italian meringue buttercream and I'm placing it on this mat. Now, you can also use acetate in order to do this. I find that the acetate is actually better because then you don't get any of the texturization. However, I love using my nonstick baking mat for multiple purposes, so that is what I am doing. Now, you can use different types of buttercreams for this. Do not recommend a ganache. I do recommend a buttercream for this, but I do find that Italian meringue buttercream works best because I find that American buttercream tends to snap when I do this. Now, you will not be able to use whipped cream or any other medium for this. You need that butter so that it stays nice and solidified. Then I'm placing another nonstick mat on and that super heavy pan. As that sits in the fridge to solidify up a bit, I am going to use my Italian meringue buttercream to cover up my crumb-coated cake. I know I didn't show you guys how to crumb coat in this particular video, but you can go ahead and click that video in the right-hand corner. Now, this particular portion works well with American buttercream, Italian or Swiss meringue buttercream, or even a ganache. And I just left the edges up and then decided to cut it off this way. But you can decide to do it however you would like. If you want to leave that raw edge up there to go with the raw edges of your cake, you can do that too. I let that solidify up in the fridge for just a little bit, and now I'm airbrushing it. A lot of you guys ask about my airbrushing machine. I put one down in the description box below so you can see what airbrushing machine will work for you. Honestly, I haven't really come across a bad airbrushing machine. The only time my airbrush really goes wrong for me is if I personally don't take care of it. So you do want to make sure that after every time you apply any colors that you run some water through it, or you can also run some vodka through it. But whatever you do, you need to make sure that you clean it out, or else everything is going to come out a wrong color all the time and you're going to get a lot of clogging as well. Now, there is no real art to this portion. You just want to make sure that you get an even coating all the way around. If you notice that there are patches, go ahead and use a little bit more airbrush on that portion. Just make sure that you don't airbrush too much in one spot, or else you're going to end up with bubbles everywhere. And of course, I'm going to splatter this with a little bit of edible gold paint too. So this stayed in the fridge for about 30 minutes. You don't want to go any longer, because if you go any longer, it won't be bendable anymore and you're just going to get snapping all over the place. So definitely place that on around the 30-minute mark. When everything kind of lifts from it without taking off too much of that buttercream, that's when you know that it is ready. Now, as you can see with my Italian meringue buttercream, it just still sticks to everything, so I don't need to put any extra shortening or anything like that. However, if you used American buttercream on your cake, you will want to put a little bit of extra shortening. So you see this portion right here. The reason that it has a little bit of cracking is because that portion was a little bit thinner, so it was a little bit cooler than everything else. Then what you want to do is take your impeccably clean hands and just rub out any of the textures that you're not a fan of. This also helps press that into your cake too. You can just leave the texture if you'd like, but you can also do that too if you want it a little bit more smooth. Then I'm going to be adding some of these really beautiful gold sprinkles on the bottom. You could also do this with those rock candies, which I actually wanted to use, but I didn't realize that I had run out of them. So if I had the choice, I definitely would put those rock candies in there, and then I would kind of outline that portion with gold as well. I really want to make sure that those sprinkles are nice and pressed in, so I'm taking this tiny tool and just kind of gently pressing in those sprinkles. Now comes the fun part where everything really comes together. At this point, I was kind of like, where am I going with this design? But once I add this gold on, I really feel it comes together. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take some of my edible sweet sticks luster dust, and this is in gold. I think that's what the color is called, but there are several golds in this line. And then I mixed it with some vodka. Now, if you don't have access to vodka, or you prefer not to use alcohol, you can use a clear extract like lemon extract. I get a lot of questions asking me why I prefer to use one over the other, but the reason is when you use vodka, you're going to get a more truer color with that gold luster dust or whatever luster dust you're using. I find when I use extracts, it changes the way that the color comes out. So you really got to play around with it and see which color you actually prefer to be used on your cakes and cookies. Now I have air conditioning in my house, so you'll notice that that buttercream is not moving at all. But if I were to wait a little bit longer when it got a little bit hotter in my place, that would start flopping over. So this cake is definitely going to be something that you want to offer during colder months. And if somebody requests it, just make sure that you really outline what might happen to their cake if they actually go with this. Or you can always make that buttercream edge a lot shorter, and that way it's going to be a lot sturdier. Now, I really mean it when I said I was going to try to do a different type of flour for this cake, but I had about 30 minutes left until my friend was going to show up to pick this up. So I just decided to go with my classic rose cutter. I love this cutter. It's my favorite. So easy to use. Even my 4-year-old can use it. So I highly suggest if you've ever struggled with sugar flours, or if you just don't like to wait around like me, then definitely invest in one. After thinning out those petals, then I'm just going to roll it up. And when you're rolling it, make sure that you do put the center in lower, and then you put all of those petals up higher and higher, and then go ahead and play around with it. And this is my classic Lollipop Trick that I love to use. I just took the same flour that I did before and I wrapped it around my lollipop instead. And I created several layers so that that would be much bigger. A lot of customers don't like the idea of having a lot of inedible things on their cake, so I just find that this is a way to make sure that that flour is completely edible. All right, and then I'm going to give a final sprinkling of some gold right on top there, as well as some more gold paint. You didn't think I would just leave it at that little bit of gold, right? You could totally skip this part, but if you do want to add a little bit of gold, I like to put a little bit on the edges, and I don't even go all the way around with this. I just kind of do it haphazardly until I'm happy with how much gold is on there. If you guys have been watching my channel for a while, then you know all of my go-to things are usually flowers and involve some sort of gold element on the cake. What is your go-to thing that you always put on your cakes, or at least almost always put on your cakes? Let me know down in the comments below. By the way, this is something that I never actually share, but I think it might be useful for those of you that are just starting out. I always just keep my luster dust mixed with a little bit of that vodka, and I put it in a container. That way I don't have to remix all the time, and it's a lot faster when I just have to add a little bit more vodka if it's dried out. Now I'm going to add on my gold leaf, of course. Now this is relatively sticky still, so the gold leaf is going to attach to it relatively easily. Now if you are using something like American buttercream for this and you want to add gold leaf on, then you can definitely be a lot more aggressive with it, and I would actually recommend that you take that piece of parchment paper that it usually comes on it and just kind of stamp it and stick it right on your cake. And there you have it, our beautiful freestanding buttercream cake. And definitely put this in the fridge for at least an hour before giving it to your customers so that it's nice and solidified. Now let's get into the pricing of this cake. Now I'll say this once and I'll say it probably 1,000 more times, guys. Pricing your cakes is such a personal thing. I price my cakes based on the location of where I live and also how much work and materials goes into this. Now, just to give you a little bit more of a frame of reference of why I charge what I charge, yesterday I put out a tutorial where I showed you how to make that $120 beach themed cake. Now that used pretty much the same amount of materials, except this has an addition of that gold flake, gold splatter, and gold paint, which definitely drives up some of the cost. However, we've got so much technique going on with this buttercream on the side that is freestanding, and it's a little bit more delicate along with all of those roses. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!